The Rethani do not grant credentials, they reveal them. That distinction took me 3 years to understand, and another 8 to appreciate fully. When you present yourself before the Doctrinal Assembly as a representative of Earth, when you submit your transit authorizations, your mission charter, your letters of standing, you are not applying for recognition. You are submitting yourself for verification against the soul register, the Assembly's sacred index of every sentient being permitted to hold standing before its body. If your entry exists, you have standing. If it does not, you are not refused. You are simply declared absent. A thing that is not in the register is not denied a seat at the table. It is understood to have never arrived. For 11 years, I had a seat at that table. Not because the Rethani found my entry. They never did. My credentials were provisionally accepted on the grounds that verification was ongoing, a procedural grace extended to non-Rethani species whose soul registration status had not yet been formally resolved. It was, the Assembly assured us, a temporary administrative condition. The resolution would come when it came. In the meantime, Earth Mission maintained its posting, and I attended the sessions, and the Archdocent Varath Soel looked past my shoulder, the way you look past a piece of furniture you have decided to rearrange, when the season changes. The season changed in the 11th year. I do not know what shifted in the Assembly's internal calculus. Perhaps it was the trade framework we had negotiated with the Kesari Compact, the one that opened 12 transit corridors the Rethani had considered their exclusive administrative domain. Perhaps it was simply that 11 years of furniture will eventually need to be moved. The formal challenge arrived at Earth Mission 7 days before the quarterly session. A resolution of doctrinal verification, signed by 9 of the Assembly's 14 archdocents, declaring that the provisional grace period for Earth's soul registration status had lapsed and that no further extension could be granted under Articles of Sacred Procedure without a confirmed register entry. My aide, a young man named Fen Cordis, who had been at the posting for 2 years and still flinched when the Rethani chant officers began their session, invocations, read the resolution twice, and asked me what we were going to do. I told him to make sure the binding on the document we had prepared was tight. The Rethani use humidity-sensitive adhesive on their archival materials. The chamber ran cold. The session opened the way they always do. The chant officers in their layered gray vestments, the incense coils turning in the wall alcoves. The 14 archdocents arranged in their curved tier above the verification floor. Varath Sohil occupied the center seat. He had held it for 19 years. He wore his satisfaction, the way senior men of institutional power wear it. Not as expression, but as posture, a settled quality to the shoulders. A stillness that said the outcome of this session had already been inscribed somewhere more permanent than the record. The human delegation occupied the floor seats below the tier. Myself, Fen, and our 2 mission attachés. The other species delegations occupied the galleries to either side. Kesari, Dravith, Orvani, the Solon Collective. Some of them I had known for years. None of them looked at us. Archdocent Soel read the resolution into the record himself. It took 4 minutes. The procedural language was precise, and I will grant them this, graceful. The Assembly's sacred texts have a cadence that survives even with administrative eviction. Earth Mission's provisional status was formally lapsed. Our credentials were not revoked. They were declared unverifiable, which is a different category entirely. We were not asked to leave. We were informed that the seats we occupied were not, in the Assembly's register of present parties, currently occupied. He set the document down. He looked at the floor below him, at me, at Fen, at the 2 attachés, with the expression of a man completing a task that had been on his list for some time. I had known Varath Sol for 11 years. I had sat in his chamber through 43 quarterly sessions, through 7 treaty negotiations, through 3 doctrinal crises that shook the Assembly's internal hierarchy badly enough to replace 4 of his 14 colleagues. I had drunk the ceremonial welcome tea at the start of each session, which tasted of mineral water and old regret. I had watched him manage the room the way a river manages its banks, with patience, with the absolute confidence of something that does not need to hurry. I stood up. Fen was already moving. He had the document under his arm, the one we had spent 6 months preparing and another 5 years before that making possible. He walked to the Assembly's verification table, which sits at the base of the archdocent's tier. where submitted credentials are formally received into the record. He set the document on it. A single bound volume, 412 pages, the cover marked in the Assembly's own archival glyphs. He stepped back. I looked up at Varath Soel. I did not speak. There was nothing I needed to say that the document did not say more completely. We left. The corridor outside the Assembly chamber is a long, vaulted passage of pale stone, lined with alcoves holding the incense coils the Rethani keep burning between sessions. A continuous offering, they say, to the archive of all souls, the metaphysical ledger from which their register is understood to be a mortal copy. The smell of it had been in my clothing for 11 years. I was used to it, the way you get used to the smell of a place where you have spent a long time doing something that mattered. Fen walked beside me. He did not ask what would happen next. He had read the document. He knew what was in it. What was in it was the soul register, not a copy, not a summary. The register itself, all 14,206 entries, indexed by species designation, cross-referenced to commercial transit authorizations, annotated in the Assembly's own internal glyph script with the administrative notes, the archdocents attached to each entry during their closed verification sessions, the hidden layer, the one they consider inaccessible to outside parties because it exists only within the Assembly's sealed archival network, which runs on a communications protocol the Rethani developed 3 centuries ago and have never shared with any other species. The protocol was not, as it turned out, difficult to read. It was simply old, and old systems, in our experience, have the same property as old institutions. They assume that the only people who will ever look at them are the people who built them. We had been reading the Assembly's archival network for 6 years. The first 5, we were building the index. The last one, we were confirming it was complete. The document Fen placed on the verification table was not a credential submission. It was a receipt, proof that for 6 of the 11 years we had held our provisional seats, we had been reading the sacred index the Assembly used to decide who deserved a seat, proof that every administrative notation Varath Soel had appended to Earth mission's unresolved status, and there were, I can tell you, a considerable number, had been read, catalogued, and filed. They would open it. They would understand what it was within the first 20 pages. By page 40, they would reach the section cross-referencing the Assembly's private deliberations on the Kisari transit corridors. Deliberations the Rethani had used to try to position themselves ahead of the framework we eventually negotiated. The deliberations they had conducted inside their sealed network, confident no outside party could access them. I do not know exactly when the chamber went quiet. We were halfway down the corridor before I heard it. The chant officer's invocation stopping mid-phrase, the kind of silence that is not a pause but a rupture. I did not slow down. There is a kind of sorrow that lives alongside vindication, and I have never found a clean way to separate them. 11 years is a long time to sit in a room where the people above you have decided, on theological grounds, that you do not exist in the ledger that matters. You get used to it the way you get used to any low-grade weight. You stop noticing it until the moment it lifts, and then you notice all at once how long you have been carrying it. The Assembly would file challenges. There would be hearings. The question of whether our indexing of their archival network constituted a violation of sacred procedure would be debated by people who had spent their careers deciding what sacred procedure covered. Some of those debates would be genuine. The Rethani are not, in the main, dishonest. They are simply a body that has confused the longevity of its own authority with a guarantee of its permanence. Fen held the door at the end of the corridor. Pale light from the transit plaza outside. I stepped through. Behind us, in the chamber we had just left, the Assembly's archivist was opening a document that proved the most sacred thing the Rethani Doctrinal Assembly possessed. The index they used to decide who existed and who did not had been, for 6 years, simply an archive. And we had always known how to read those,